Well, I feel that I should make a video on another player that should the Calgary Flames make a play for. Hi there, it's Brett Hornby here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. And last off season, I made a couple videos talking about, worked out to be a couple players on the Arizona Coyotes that should the Calgary Flames consider making a play for, being the goaltender Darcy Kemper or defenseman Oliver Ekman-Larsson. However, there's definitely some rumors going around, and I recently watched a video from Top Shelf Hockey that he brought up an article from the Atlantic. And I did recently make a video talking about should the Calgary Flames maybe consider moving on from Brad Chalivin. But one change that I think the Calgary Flames should do to get stuck out of neutral is change the core. So the player that I'm going to talk about that we should potentially make a play for is Jack Eichel from the Buffalo Sabres. Do you think the Calgary Flames should try to make a play for Jack Eichel? It's definitely no secret right now that the Buffalo Sabres are definitely in much worse shape, as it seems like they've constantly been rebuilding that they don't even get to neutral. At least for the Calgary Flames, we've made the playoffs once in a while, but at least not get out of the first round. But the Buffalo Sabres and forward Jack Eichel has definitely been disgruntled, and I think it's extremely unlikely he is going to be playing for the Buffalo Sabres next year. But there's rumors that maybe the Calgary Flames might make a play for him. And what kind of trade do you think it would take for the Calgary Flames to get a Jack Eichel? And it might not be exactly what you're thinking in mind. And would it be worth the price, not only to make it appeasing to the Buffalo Sabres, but to make the cap work? But I think this would definitely change the core, shake things up. But would it make us better? Because the article that Top Shelf Hockey touched upon, that apparently the two players that are in play for the Buffalo Sabres, as they obviously need to make changes for their franchise, especially if their top player is disgruntled, that apparently Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart are in play. And then a couple players that potentially could be in play for the Calgary Flames, as they've always been tied to rumors, is Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan. But Johnny Gaudreau has definitely been rumored to potentially be shopped around, and I still think it is potentially worth looking at shopping around Johnny Gaudreau, because he still has one more year left on his contract, and apparently his no movement clause kicks in next season. And there's some speculation that when he becomes a free agent, he wants to move closer back home. He grew up as a Flyers fan. There's always been that connection with the Flyers and the New Jersey Devils. But could Buffalo be interested in that package? However, we might have to really take a sting in this trade, because I do not think Buffalo would exactly take just that 2 for 2. And the fact that the money still won't work when you look at cap friendly. There's actually speculation in that article. If you watch that video and read that article, watch that video from Top Shelf Hockey, we might actually consider having to bite the bullet and trade Matthew Tkachuk to make this work for the Buffalo Sabres. Because there's actually been some rumors that maybe the Calgary Flames may, as crazy as it sounds, and I almost think Matthew Tkachuk is potentially a player that I should still deem untouchable. After this season, Matthew Tkachuk had a down season, and some are thinking maybe we should change that. But next year he is going to have a qualifying offer that is going to be at least $9 million, because that's how his contract is structured. He's still a restricted free agent. But it might have to take that to get Jack Eichel here in Calgary. And then the other pieces that we're throwing in that probably would have to require getting Jack Eichel is trading away Connor Zary, the player that we drafted in the first round last season, and another first round pick. Because the Buffalo is going to want to look at getting the player right now and some more futures. And Buffalo definitely stacked up on some draft picks at the deadline, because they're still in a tire fire that never seems to go out. But the Buffalo Sabres would get, at least potentially in this trade, 2 picks in the top 10 or top 15, depending on how the draft lottery works. But if you look at capfriendly.com, we might really have to bite the bullet if we were to make a play for Jack Eichel. And let's say if we did trade away, let's at least say we traded away Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan and maybe another roster player or a prospect or a pick to get Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart. Because Sam Reinhart would actually get closer to home in his case, being the son of Paul Reinhart. He actually played for the Calgary Flames, and actually he is a brother of Max Reinhart, but he hasn't panned out. Would the Calgary Flames be better? Let's say if we took out Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau. Still keep Elias Lindholm. I mean, that's another piece that we might have to dangle. But the other side of it was, would Buffalo consider this trade, knowing that Johnny Gaudreau would be an unrestricted free agent after this year? Yes, he'd be a little closer home, but would he want to stay in Buffalo? Because that's definitely the problem with Buffalo right now is, well, understandably, when the team's been, in the dumps for over 10 years, they have not made the playoffs. And it seems like it's a constant struggle. And your franchise player that you drafted second overall in 2015 wants out and he feels a disconnect. I mean, definitely it's a lot of work to do, but that's what I have to take for Buffalo to get him. Because if you look at the cap hits, I mean, Matthew Tkachuk's cap hit is $7 million, but he's going to get paid $9 million next year, and then he is a restricted free agent where his qualifying offer would at least be $9 million. But that would be the Matthew Tkachuk. That might be what we have to part with if we make a play for Jack Eichel. But when it comes to Johnny Gaudreau, well, after next season, he is an unrestricted free agent. His cap hit is $6.75 million, and one of the reasons why I think it's worth shopping around Johnny Gaudreau is, A, the return we can get, not necessarily this trade, but I'm just talking about that video in the news story, and then if Jack Eichel's available, a lot of teams will line up to Buffalo. But just, the playoffs and their speculation that after when Johnny Gaudreau becomes an unrestricted free agent, it's not necessarily is he going to stay in Calgary. So it might be a case of getting something for him while we can. And in the case of Sean Monahan, well, he has a modified no movement clause, so I guess he has the right to say, I ain't going to Buffalo, but he is signed until the end of the 2022-23 season before he becomes an unrestricted free agent, and his cap hit is $6.375 million. So if you add those two up, that's $13.5 million. And cap hit for just Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan, we're right up against the cap, but the other piece of this that we could potentially free out some money is that I think personally, Mark Giordano, I only give a 50% chance that he's going to be a Calgary Flame next year. And the reason for that is I think he is going to be exposed in the Seattle Kraken expansion draft, and maybe he'll get plucked, or potentially with the risk of losing for nothing, could the Calgary Flames trade him to another team just to get something for him. That's why I think, potentially Mark Giordano, that's my personal opinion, that's what it is, just looking at the business. I mean, he has one more year left on his contract at $6.75 million. But the Calgary Flames would still need to move out more money if we were to, let's say, get a Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart as his rumored deal is. Because if you look at the Buffalo Sabres, cap friendly, well, Jack Eichel being the centerpiece and their captain, well, he still has he's an unrestricted free agent after the 25-26 season, making $10 million. So he has a cap hit of $10 million, and he's one heck of a player, and he's still having to recover from injuries on the injured reserve. But also, if you look at Sam Reinhart, I mean, he is a restricted free agent. Actually, he is a restricted free agent coming in to the season, and his cap hit is $5.2 million. And I'm sure his qualifying offer is at least that. So that's $15.5 million, at least the Calgary Flames will need to make this trade work. I mean, other free agents that are coming off the books is Derek Ryan's $3 million contract comes off the books. So that's potentially, it could work that way. But I think, it's not necessarily a 2-for-2. I would be willing to part with Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau and potentially a first-round pick and maybe, a B-level prospect, ship him off to Buffalo to get Jack Eichel and Sam Reinhart, because I think we would be a little better. We'll definitely be better up the middle, especially if we still keep Elias Lindholm. And hopefully we can still keep Matthew Tkachuk. If it involves Matthew Tkachuk, if I picked up the phone, if I was Brad Treliving or whoever the general manager is for the Calgary Flames, and I called Kevin Adams and he said, yeah, Matthew Tkachuk, I was like, nope. That's what I wouldn't trade Matthew Tkachuk. Even though his cap, and I think Matthew Tkachuk will bounce back next year because of two words. As I mentioned, the qualifying offer, contract year. And maybe Johnny Gaudreau will definitely step up. I mean, remember the Buffalo Sabres were apparently supposed to be a little better because they signed Taylor Hall at the free agent frenzy last year, and then they had that record-tying losing streak in the capper. But would Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan be willing to go to Buffalo if we were to do this? Jack Eichel, I think he will go anywhere. I think his days in Buffalo are done. Because you can't unring that bell or put the cow back in the barn or put the tube back in the toothpaste. Now that it's out there that he is disgruntled, and other general managers are going to say, Jack Eichel's disgruntled. He's a franchise player. We should try to get him. And then hypothetically, if we get him, they would definitely make the Battle of Alberta a lot more intriguing, just because the first and second overall picks are in Alberta. Because in 2015, Connor McDavid was drafted first overall by the Edmonton Oilers when they really got lucky in the draft lottery. And Buffalo, I remember, tried really damn hard to tank to get that first overall pick. And I mean, Jack Eichel is, if Connor McDavid's an A double plus, I'm going to say Jack Eichel at worst is an A, almost A plus. It would definitely be an upgrade, but would you be willing to bite the bullet if the rumor trade is what it says in that Atlantic article, that if the Calgary Flames were going to acquire Sam Reinhart and Jack Eichel, we would have to trade Matthew Tkachuk, Connor Zary, and a first-round pick, I'm assuming, in this upcoming draft, to get him. But to make the cap work, we'd have to either move out some money with Mark Giordano, or I would be willing to do a Sean Monahan, Johnny Gaudreau, first-round pick, and maybe a B-level prospect to send him to Buffalo to bring it in. I mean, we're going to need to have at least $16 million in cap space, and Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan occupy 13 of that. Derek Ryan's $3 million comes off the Bucks. I think that could work. It's just a matter of what they want to go to Buffalo, and I would think for sure Jack Eichel, he'll want to go anywhere else, and Sam Reinhart would be closer to home. So I could see them wanting to come here. But would you be willing to make a play for Jack Eichel? Should the Calgary Flames make a play for Jack Eichel? That's the best package I think I can come up with based on that combination of that Athletic article and just what I came up with. That would be most logical, because I still think the Calgary Flames still need to make a change to the core, and this definitely would do that. I think it would make us better up the center if we could still keep Elias Lindholm and Matthew Tkachuk, if we can bring in a Jack Eichel. If Matthew Tkachuk has to go in the trade, I would probably back off and see what other teams are offer. But that's just an interesting rumor that, potentially I think it could work. It might be worth doing if the price is right and makes sense. It doesn't sacrifice too much of the future. I mean, trading away a pick that we already drafted and a first-round pick, I mean, that's similar to, Joe Newendike being traded for Jerome McGinley. And it definitely worked out best for both franchises. I mean, Buffalo definitely needs to cut bait with Jack Eichel by the sounds of it. Sam Reinhart is another player, and I mean, Buffalo obviously has to make changes just to better their fortunes, at least get closer to that playoff spot. And then the Flames, we just are stuck in neutral. When you've only gone out of the first round twice since 1989 when we won the Stanley Cup, that's not that much better in my mind, just being either mirror rock or T and just miss the playoffs or get in and then say bye-bye in the first round. We need to take that next step, and I think this would do it, both with the trading away getting a franchise player, because I also said in my Brad Treliving video, Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau are good players, but I do not think they're players that you put on the marquee to be a face of the franchise. They're better as role players. I mean, Jack Eichel, I think he is someone that can be a role player, a marquee player, like what Joe McGinley was for the Calgary Flames, like Connor McDavid is right now for the Edmonton Oilers, or Austin Matthews for the Toronto Maple Leafs, or Sidney Crosby for the Pittsburgh Penguins, or Alexander Ovechkin for the Washington Capitals. But if Jack Eichel is available, is known around the league that he's a disgruntled player, and Jack Eichel also pouted a little bit, crying that he is jealous at, let's say, an Austin Matthews, or even a Connor McDavid, where they've at least gone to the playoffs. Jack Eichel, and same with Sam Reinhart, they've not been in the playoffs. At least, some of our players, like Sean Monahan, Johnny Gaudreau, Matthew Tkachuk, and then when we recently traded away Sam Bennett, they've gone to the playoffs and shown that they have bits in the playoffs. Jack Eichel wants to know what it's like to be in the playoffs. And I think, this trade would give him that, and Buffalo can still continue to rebuild. But it's just either both teams need a change. The Flames, Buffalo definitely does, just so they can finally, get better and make the playoffs. And maybe still get Rick Jeanneret some last excitement before whenever he stops playing calling games. But I'll just gotta go back to the top. Should the Calgary Flames make a play for Jack Eichel? What package would it take to get him? I mean, Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau has always been rumored to be in trades. I mean, Sean Monahan was rumored to get traded for a pair of Luc Dubois, and there's speculation. I know Eric Francis, sometimes he says outrageous things that he is speculating, and I think I'm starting to believe it a little more, that after next season, when Johnny Gaudreau becomes an unrestricted free agent in 2022 free agent frenzy, there's speculation that he is not going to come back to Calgary, that he wants to come closer to home. Buffalo will be closer to home and might give him a fresh start there. But that's just this rumor. It's an interesting trade rumor that's out there, and that was an interesting video that I saw from Top Shelf Hockey. But I am not willing to part with Matthew Tkachuk, though. That's all I'm going to say. I'll part with other players and a first-round pick and potentially Connor Zary, because it's Jack freaking Eichel. So anyway, as I like to say, if you want to follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey, Home the Flames, Hitmen, Roughnecks, and Stampeders. I mostly do talk Calgary sports on my YouTube channel, but I also do a variety of non-sports content like personal vlogs, attempt to comedy, and I also do share my experience with them on the road or a sport event. Who knows, maybe assuming COVID ever ends and the COVID police ever allow us to go to sport events again, maybe I'll go to a Flames game in the future with Jack Eichel. Jack Eichel wearing Blasty? I actually would like that if the price is right. But the other thing I also do on my channel, that I've done a lot more recently, is vlogging on the go. And most recently, I went back to the old high school and the old neighborhood in Crescent Heights here in Calgary. So if that all sounds like it'd be interesting to watch, do follow along with this Calgary sports fan's journey. You know what you do, just make sure you hit like and subscribe. I also have my other social media links down in the description below. So, I have to ask, should the Calgary Flames make a play for Jack Eichel? I think we should, if the price is right, if it makes sense for both sides, if both players are getting traded, would agree to go to their respective franchises, and Matthew Tkachuk is not involved. I am not willing to trade Matthew Tkachuk, but I think we might make a deal that could work elsewhere, that could still work to make both franchises happy. So I'll say go Flames go, and I'll see you in the next video.